When Amara, a Nigerian graduate, takes a job with a cold Korean tech CEO, she expects culture shock, not connection. But in the silence between languages, something deeper begins to grow. A slow-burning romance across worlds, power and pride. The hum of the airplane filled Amara's ears like a distant lullaby, but sleep refused to come. She sat upright, eyes fixed on the clouds outside the window, as though she could read her future in their drifting shapes. Lagos was behind her now, thousands of feet below, and ahead was something unknown, colder, cleaner, more calculated. Her fingers gripped the folder in her lap, the edges worn from days of handling. Inside were documents, credentials, and the only letter that mattered now. A single page that read, "Dear Ms. Amara Nwosu, we are pleased to invite you to interview for the position of Language and Cultural Liaison with J-Tech Industries, Seoul, South Korea." She didn't know how many people applied, or why they chose her. All she knew was that her visa was approved, her bags were packed, and her old life had been folded up neatly and stored away for now. The plane landed with a soft thud in Incheon, but her heart hit harder. She stepped into a world of fast footsteps and unfamiliar signs, where everything moved with purpose and precision. Her English was flawless, and her Korean, perfect, with the kind of fluidity only hard-earned immersion can give. Still, she was a foreigner here. A guest. And in Seoul, even guests are expected to keep quiet and not overstay. A black car waited for her at the terminal. No nameplate, just a polite man in a gray suit who gestured for her to follow. No words were exchanged. She sat in the back seat, watching the city blur past, glass towers, neon lights, the occasional cherry blossom catching the wind like a secret. J-Tech's headquarters rose like a mirror to the sky, steel and silence. Inside, everything was minimalist and cold, like a place designed to make people feel small. Amara was led to the top floor. A woman in a sharp white suit asked her to wait. "The CEO will see you now." Amara expected a panel, maybe a formal HR team. Instead, one man entered the room. Ji-hoon Lee, mid-30s, impeccably dressed in a dark gray tailored suit. He moved like a shadow, controlled, unreadable. His gaze landed on her and stayed there, flat and analytical. He didn't sit. "You're fluent?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," she replied, her voice calm, respectful. Standard and regional dialects. A silence stretched between them. Then he finally said, "You start tomorrow. First meeting is at 7:30 a.m. No handshake. No smile. No congratulations. Just the quiet sound of her own breath as he left the room." The next morning, she found herself in a conference room surrounded by men in dark suits. All eyes on Ji-hoon as he delivered strategic points in rapid Korean. Amara translated in real time, her tone measured, professional. She could feel the surprise in the room. Her pronunciation. Her precision. She was more than they expected. Ji-hoon never looked directly at her, but once, during a heated debate, he paused mid-sentence, waiting for her to catch up. And when she did, there was the faintest twitch in his jaw. Approval, maybe. Or curiosity. Days passed in a blur of boardrooms and back-to-back meetings. Amara moved through the building like a silent observer, always present, never involved. She began to notice patterns. How Ji-hoon rarely smiled. How his team feared disappointing him. How his words, though sharp, were never wasted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He was the kind of man who could freeze a room just by walking in. And yet she sensed something beneath it. A man holding something back. Not from her. From the world. Late one night, after a long debrief session, she walked past the executive wing. His office light was still on. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Ji-hoon stood alone, staring at a wall of monitors. He didn't acknowledge her presence, but he didn't close the door either. She paused, one foot still in the hallway, then quietly kept walking. When she reached the elevator, she found a single note taped beside the button. It read, "You're not here just to translate. Be careful what you uncover." No name. No handwriting she recognized. Just a warning. The early morning air in Seoul was crisp, the sky still wearing the soft gray of dawn. Amara stepped out of her apartment, adjusting the strap of her handbag as she joined the quiet rush of the city. Her new routine was already taking shape. A short walk to the subway station. A transfer at Jongno 3GA. Then a silent ride to the sleek tower that was J-Tech Industries. No one greeted her with smiles at the front desk, but no one questioned her presence either. She was beginning to blend in, seen but not stared at, foreign but not strange. Inside the office, Amara moved with quiet confidence. Her role was clear. Sit beside Ji-hoon during meetings, listen carefully, and translate when needed. Most of the time, he didn't ask for much. He would glance at her when he wanted her to step in. A look. A slight nod. Their communication was unspoken but efficient. Ji-hoon was a man who valued silence more than small talk. He didn't micromanage. He expected precision. And Amara gave him that. Every sentence. Every tone. Every cultural nuance. Her work was her shield. And in this unfamiliar world, it kept her steady. During breaks, Amara began noticing the rhythms of the office. The way employees lowered their voices when Ji-hoon passed. The way his executive assistant, Min-seo, kept a strict wall between the CEO and everyone else. The way decisions were made quickly, without explanation. It wasn't a hostile environment, just a focused one. And Ji-hoon, despite his distant nature, was respected. Every policy, every email, every meeting bore his stamp, clear, decisive, controlled. In the cafeteria, Amara would sit alone with a tray of simple food, steamed rice, pickled radish, sometimes bulgogi when she felt brave. A few employees began to nod at her in the hallways. One of the junior analysts, Yoonji, even asked if she wanted to join their lunch table. Amara smiled politely but declined. She was still finding her footing, still figuring out how close was too close. One afternoon, after a meeting with Japanese investors, Ji-hoon called her into his office. She stood by the door, waiting. He didn't look up from his desk. You adjusted the phrasing during that last pitch. Why? She hesitated. The way you said it sounded aggressive. I softened the tone slightly. In Japanese culture, indirectness is a form of respect. He finally looked up. You took a risk. She met his gaze. It felt necessary. A pause followed. Then simply he said, it worked. There was no smile, no thank you. Just acknowledgement. And for Amara, that was enough. The rest of the week passed with quiet progress. Ji-hoon and Amara traveled to a tech expo outside of the city. The schedule was packed, product launches, Q/and sessions, high-level networking events. Amara moved beside him through every interaction, making sure his meaning landed where words might fail. At one point, during a panel interview, the moderator asked Ji-hoon about Chteka's vision for international collaboration. Ji-hoon spoke briefly, then nodded at Amara. She translated, not just the words, but the intent. Her voice steady, her Korean clear. When she finished, the room applauded. Ji-hoon said nothing, but as they stepped off the stage, he handed her a bottle of water without a word. A small gesture. But the first. Back in Seoul, the routine continued. Amara returned to her small apartment each night, tired but satisfied. She would review documents, practice Korean phrases, video call her younger brother back home, and reflect on the new life she was building. Quietly, steadily, without fanfare. One Friday evening, as the office began to empty out, Ji-hoon stepped out of his office and found her still typing notes at her desk. You work late, he said. She looked up, a little startled. I prefer to finish what I start, she replied. He nodded. Then, without another word, he walked toward the elevator. She returned to her work. The days at J-Tech were starting to feel familiar. Not warm, but manageable. Amara had developed a rhythm. Early mornings, sharp suits, clear translations, quiet evenings. Each task she performed added a thin layer of confidence beneath her calm exterior. She still wasn't part of any circle at the office, but the glances she received had shifted. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. Ji-hoon remained distant but predictable. He worked with the kind of intensity that left no room for small mistakes. Amara learned to anticipate his cues, when he wanted silence, when he expected input, and when he simply needed her to keep up. Their communication was still mostly work-based, but it was becoming smoother, almost like they were learning a quiet language of efficiency between them. One morning, Amara arrived to find a new schedule on her desk. An upcoming delegation from the United States was visiting for a strategic tech partnership, and she would be handling real-time interpretation between Ji-hoon's team and the foreign guests. It wasn't an easy assignment. Chteka's American partners spoke fast, often cut in, and used business slang that didn't always translate cleanly. Ji-hoon, for his part, expected absolute clarity. Amara worked late for 3 nights preparing, reviewing pitch decks, learning the technical vocabulary, and crafting polite yet assertive phrases that would suit both cultures. The meeting came, and Amara delivered. Her translations were calm and exact. She didn't hesitate. She moved between English and Korean with the grace of someone who had earned her place. When the guests left, one of Ji-hoon's senior managers turned to him and said in Korean, "The translator was more effective than the software." Ji-hoon didn't respond immediately. He just glanced at Amara, then returned to his desk. Later that day, she received an envelope in her inbox, not from HR but directly from the CEO's office. Inside was a handwritten note. Just 4 words. "You did very well." No signature. But it didn't need one. Outside of work, Amara started exploring the city more. On Saturdays, she visited local bookstores, Korean cafes, and small art galleries tucked away in quiet corners of Seoul. She still hadn't made close friends, but she no longer felt like a stranger. She began taking language notes again, not to study, but to observe. The difference between how people spoke in the street versus the boardroom. The tones. The pauses. The warmth or absence of it. Language was never just about words. She knew that now more than ever. At the office, small changes were happening. Mincio, the executive assistant, no longer kept her at arm's length. She started forwarding Amara information in advance, briefing notes, summaries, even a few friendly comments in the margins. In the cafeteria, Yoonji from the analytics team waved at her more often. Once, she even sat down beside Amara and said, "You must be very smart. CEO Lee doesn't talk to anyone for more than 5 minutes. He listens to you." Amara just smiled. "He listens when it's important." That same afternoon, Ji-hoon asked her to review a document in private. It was a press statement for a new product launch, technically written but flat. "They won't respond to this tone," Amara said carefully. "It feels cold. Maybe something with more cultural awareness, more balance." Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair. "Rewrite it." She blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "Your voice has a way of softening sharp edges. I want to see what that looks like in writing." She took the document home and stayed up most of the night crafting it. When she handed it back the next day, he read it in silence, then said, "Print this version." There were no thank yous, just continued trust. That evening, as Amara exited the building, it began to rain, soft at first, then heavier. She hadn't brought an umbrella. The streets were slick, the traffic louder under the downpour. She stood under the awning, considering her options. Then, without a word, someone extended an umbrella beside her. Ji-hoon. No greeting. No explanation. Just an umbrella. They walked to the corner in silence, then stood there for a moment, waiting for separate cars. It was an ordinary gesture. Not romantic. Not suggestive. But somehow, in its simplicity, it felt significant. Her car arrived first. She entered, settled into the back seat, and glanced out the window. Ji-hoon stood there, the umbrella now hanging by his side. Their eyes met through the glass for a brief second. Then the driver pulled into the street, and the office lights faded behind her. The changing seasons in Seoul brought with them a sharper wind, one that bit through coats and settled in the chest like an uninvited guest. Amara had ignored the signs for days, the scratch in her throat, the dull ache behind her eyes, the heaviness in her limbs. She pushed through meetings, translated flawlessly, even smiled politely when required. But her body had begun to protest. By midweek, her voice had grown hoarse, her hands trembled slightly when she took notes, and the pounding in her head made even the softest lights feel too bright. Ji-hoon noticed before anyone else. It was during a morning meeting. She coughed once, twice, tried to suppress it, but her composure cracked. Ji-hoon stopped speaking. The room fell silent. Amara, mortified, bowed her head and whispered an apology. He said nothing at first. Then, calmly, "Meeting adjourned." Without further explanation, he rose from his chair and left. Everyone followed. Back in her small office corner, Amara sipped from a paper cup of warm tea, fighting dizziness. She had barely logged a few notes when Ji-hoon appeared at her door. "Get your things," he said simply. "You're not working today." She opened her mouth to protest, but his tone made it clear. This was not a request. She stood slowly, gathered her bag, and followed him to the elevator. Neither of them spoke during the ride down. Outside, his driver was already waiting. But instead of heading toward her apartment, the car turned in the opposite direction, toward the quiet hills on the northern edge of the city. Amara blinked through the window, confused, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are we going?" Ji-hoon glanced at her briefly. "You're too sick to be alone. My house is nearby. There's a private physician. You'll be more comfortable there." His home was exactly as she imagined it, spacious, minimal, and silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a peaceful garden. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and cold air. She was shown to a guest room on the second floor. Soft bedding. Warm lighting. Absolute stillness. The doctor arrived within an hour, examined her quietly, and prescribed rest, hydration, and medication. For the next 2 days, Amara barely moved. She drifted in and out of sleep. Jihoon didn't hover, but he was present. A quiet knock on the door every few hours. A fresh glass of water on her nightstand. A tray of warm soup. Once, she woke up to find her laptop moved to the desk, papers neatly stacked beside it. He hadn't touched anything, just organized them. Like he respected her space, but wanted her to know he had been there. By the 3rd day, her fever had broken. She sat up in bed, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the pale light spill through the window. Jihoon entered without a sound, carrying a bowl of porridge. She gave him a tired smile. You didn't have to go this far. He placed the bowl on the table. You don't stop when you're sick. Someone had to. He turned to leave, but paused. Do you feel strong enough to eat downstairs? She nodded. They sat in his quiet kitchen, just the two of them. No staff. No formality. Just 2 people with mismatched bowls and warm tea. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It had softened, grown familiar. After a while, Jihoon said, You remind me of someone I used to know. She worked hard, never complained, until she collapsed. Amara looked at him. What happened to her? He stared at his cup for a long moment. She left. He didn't explain further. Later that evening, Amara sat in the study, curled on a chair with a thick blanket around her shoulders. Jihoon entered with 2 cups of tea. He handed her one without a word and took the seat across from her. For the first time, there was no laptop between them. No agenda. Just quiet breathing and the soft ticking of the wall clock. She spoke first. Why did you really bring me here? He didn't look at her right away. Because you don't ask for help. And I understand that feeling too well. She studied him. And now, he finally met her eyes. Now I know that sometimes, silence needs to be interrupted. They didn't touch. There was no dramatic music. Just something shifting quietly between them, like a door being left open for the first time. The soft rhythm of rain danced against the windows the next morning. Amara woke in the guest room, feeling clearer than she had in days. Her fever was gone, her mind sharp again, but her body still moved slowly, as if reluctant to rush back into motion. She sat up, pulling the blanket close, and looked around the room. It was quiet, peaceful, almost too perfect. And yet, there was comfort in the stillness. She wasn't just being looked after, she was being noticed. Downstairs, she found Jihoon at the small kitchen table, reading something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, not surprised, not startled. Just aware. You're awake, he said simply. How do you feel? She hesitated, then smiled faintly. Human again. He nodded, then gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. I made something easy. On the table were 2 bowls of juk, simple Korean rice porridge. Nothing fancy. Just warm and honest. They ate in silence at first. Not the stiff silence of work, but the kind that lives between 2 people who no longer feel the need to fill space with words. After a few moments, Amara looked over. Do you ever take a break? Jihoon paused. Sometimes, he said. But I don't always know what to do with it. She tilted her head. And now? He didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at her. Now I'm learning. That day passed slowly. Amara stayed indoors, walking gently through the house, resting in the study with a book, sipping tea. Jihoon went about his work, occasionally stepping out for calls, but always nearby. At one point, she passed by the living room and saw him standing by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone to his ear. His expression was softer than usual. Focused but not cold. He caught her watching, and for a moment neither looked away. Later, in the quiet of the afternoon, Amara found herself in the garden. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and full of earth. She sat on a low bench, letting the silence hold her. A few minutes passed, and Jihoon joined her without a word. They sat side by side, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the same calm air. I didn't expect this, she said quietly. He turned his head toward her. This, she nodded. To be here. To feel seen. Not as an employee. Not as someone filling a gap. Just human. Jihoon looked forward again. You don't pretend, he said after a pause. Most people do. Especially around me. You don't. She glanced at him. I don't think I know how. There was something unspoken in the space between their words. Not love, not yet. But something beginning to take shape. A warmth. A gentleness. That evening, Amara stood at the kitchen sink rinsing her cup. Jihoon entered behind her. She turned, and their eyes met again, longer this time. Stillness stretched between them. And yet neither moved. Neither spoke. But something changed. "I'll return to my apartment tomorrow," Amara said softly. "I feel strong enough now." Ji-hoon nodded. "If that's what you want." She hesitated. "It's not about what I want. It's about what's appropriate." His gaze held hers. "Sometimes what's appropriate isn't what matters most." She didn't reply. Not with words. The drive to her apartment was quiet, not tense, just gentle. She stole glances at him while pretending to look out the window, and he didn't once break his calm focus on the road. When they arrived, he helped her out, handed her the bag, and said simply, "No taxis for a while." She opened her mouth to reply, but he was already walking back to the car. She watched the car pull away, her fingers curling slightly around the bag strap. Inside her apartment, the familiar scent of her space wrapped around her, grounding her again. She set her bag down, but a glimmer of white paper peeked out from the zipper. Curious, she opened it and found a small box with a neatly wrapped bottle of Korean herbal tonic, and beneath it, a handwritten note. "In case your energy runs out before your stubbornness does." Her lips parted in a soft breath of surprise. The handwriting was careful, deliberate Ji-hoon's. Before she could fully process it, a knock echoed from the front door. Amara opened it to find her neighbor, Min-ji, standing in her pastel house slippers, her bobbed hair tucked behind one ear and a mischief-ready smile spreading across her face. "Is that the CEO's car I saw just now?" Min-ji asked, already stepping inside. Amara blinked. "How did you? Girl, please. I was watering my plants when he helped you out of the car like a whole K-drama scene. You looked like a romantic lead who just escaped from a coma." Amara laughed, trying to brush it off. "It wasn't like that. I was sick." He was just being considerate. Min-ji's brow shot up. "Considerate? Since when does your CEO personally drive sick employees home, send them back with herbal tonic, and leave adorable tsundere notes?" Amara groaned, dragging a pillow onto her lap on the couch. "Don't start." Min-ji plopped down beside her, leaned closer, and grinned. "You stayed at his house for 3 nights, didn't you?" 2.5, Amara mumbled. "That's called a long weekend in Korea. You're in love with your boss, aren't you?" Min-ji's voice was light, teasing, but there was no judgment in it. Just a kind of excitement, as if she were cheering for something quietly blooming. That night, after Min-ji had left, Amara sat on her bed in the dim light of her bedroom. The room was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. She picked up her phone, scrolling mindlessly until a new message appeared. "Ji-hoon, take care." Just 2 words. Simple. But they made her heart flutter in a way she wasn't ready to admit. She stared at them, thumb hovering over the screen, but didn't reply. Instead, she set the phone down, hugged her pillow tightly, and lay back against the sheets. Her mind drifted to the image of him standing at the stove, cooking her porridge, his quiet glances from across the living room. The way he watched without asking, noticed without needing attention. And as sleep gently tugged her under, a shy, helpless smile curved across her lips. The return to work brought a gentle tension into the air. The office lights flickered as Amara stepped out of the elevator, dressed in soft pastels that highlighted the glow she had regained. Her heels clicked quietly against the polished floor, but her heartbeat was louder. She didn't expect to run into Ji-hoon so soon, yet there he was, standing at the end of the hallway, flipping through a file. When their eyes met, both paused. A soft, breathless second passed before she gave a small bow and smiled. He returned it, reserved but unmistakably warm. The moment ended as quickly as it came, but something about it lingered like perfume on the breeze. As Amara settled back into her desk, subtle stares followed her. Colleagues exchanged glances, whispering behind screens. "That's her," the CEO carried her out that night. The gossip hummed like background static, but Amara kept her eyes on the screen. It didn't help that Eun-ji, a sharp-eyed coworker who had long admired Ji-hoon, had started watching her with quiet calculation. The next day, Ji-hoon assigned Amara to a new creative project, one that allowed her more visibility. The whispers picked up again. "She's the boss's favorite now," someone muttered in the break room. Amara overheard it but didn't flinch. Still, the shift was undeniable. One afternoon, Ji-hoon passed by the cafe corner and paused as he saw Amara laughing with another male colleague over a shared snack. The colleague leaned in to feed her a bite of cake, and she accepted it with an embarrassed laugh. Ji-hoon didn't interrupt, he just watched, expression unreadable, before walking away. Later that evening at the company party, Amara arrived wearing a simple yet elegant dress. The room buzzed with music and low chatter, but Ji-hoon's eyes immediately found her across the room. He didn't move toward her. Instead, he watched from a distance, a small smile curving his lips, pride, admiration, or maybe something more possessive. The party lights reflected in his eyes, and for a second, it felt like only the two of them existed in the room. The city moved as usual, but something inside Ji-hoon didn't. He sat alone in his minimalist living room that evening, dressed casually, but with thoughts that weighed heavier than his hoodie. The soft glow of the floor lamp bathed the room in quiet light, as he stared at the untouched glass of water on the table. His phone rested beside him, screen dark, but his mind was lit up with moments from the past week. Amara smiling at someone else, laughing too freely, being cared for by someone other than him. None of it should have mattered. But it did. He leaned back into the sofa, exhaling deeply. What was this feeling? It wasn't just concern. It was something sharper. Restless. For a man who thrived in logic and routine, Ji-hoon was now considering something completely spontaneous, inviting Amara out. Not for work. Not for obligation. Just to be with her. He picked up his phone, stared at her name in his contacts, then put it down again. Timing mattered. The next morning at the office, the usual rhythm resumed. Amara moved with quiet confidence, her energy finally restored. She caught Ji-hoon's gaze once during a team briefing, and though it lasted barely a second, something unspoken passed between them. That afternoon, a new tension wove its way through the office floor. Eunji had begun to act differently, more engaged, more present whenever Ji-hoon was nearby. She even lingered outside his office, pretending to have questions that didn't matter. Amara noticed but said nothing. Still, she couldn't deny the tiny twist in her stomach when Ji-hoon spoke to Minji longer than usual. Later that day, Ji-hoon called Amara to his office under the pretense of reviewing a proposal. She entered, organized and prepared, but something about the atmosphere felt different. He was quieter, watching her in a way he hadn't before. After the brief work talk, he leaned back in his chair. "You've been working hard," he said. "Would you be open to something lighter this weekend?" Amara blinked. "Lighter?" He looked away briefly, then back at her. "Dinner, just dinner." Amara nodded slowly. "Okay, sure." Her voice was calm, but her heartbeat wasn't. That weekend arrived quietly, wrapped in the gentle chill of a Seoul evening. Ji-hoon stands at Amara's door, sharply dressed, umbrella folded at his side. She opens the door and he pauses, his gaze moving quietly over the pastel dress she chose. "That dress, it suits you," he says, low and sincere. Her breath catches. Her fingers lift to the door as if to steady herself. He smiles like a small admission and tells her he came to pick her up for dinner. Before they step outside, the sky breaks open, rain sheets down, thunder rolling in the distance. Amara's eyes flick to the street. She hesitates. Ji-hoon notices every little hesitation. "Let's wait it out," he offers, voice gentle. She breathes, then answers barely above a whisper, "I can make dinner here." He tilts his head, pleased. "I'd like that." Inside, the kitchen is small and warm. Steam fogs the window. Amara chops vegetables with careful, practiced hands. Ji-hoon rolls his sleeves and rinses rice, moving quietly beside her. Their tasks are simple. Their timing syncs without a word. A wooden spoon is passed from hand to hand. Fingers brush, once, then again, and each brush lingers a fraction longer. She laughs softly at a clumsy moment. He laughs with her, surprised by the sound. He watches the steam lift from the pot and says, matter of fact, "You move very naturally." She looks down, cheeks warming. "I cook like this at home," she says, modest. He watches her with a look that holds both approval and something softer. Dinner is plain and honest, porridge, a simple side of kimchi, warmth in a bowl. They eat at the small table, the rain a steady presence beyond the glass. Conversation comes in small ripples. A story about a bookstore she visited, a quick joke he lets slip and then masks with a composed face. Silences are comfortable now, they've learned how to sit in them. After the plates are cleared, Amara stands to carry the last dish to the sink. Her sleeve brushes his arm as she passes. It's an everyday motion, but time seems to slow. He reaches out, gently taking her wrist. The touch is careful, respectful. He draws her closer, not roughly, but with a pull that leaves no space between them. There is a moment of gravity, of quiet decision. His lips find hers in a slow, deliberate kiss, warm, steady, unhurried. He pauses, searching her face with his eyes. She meets him, then leans in and kisses him again, deeper this time, as if answering something he did not say. The air afterward is tender and a little breathless. Amara, slightly flustered, suggests a movie to calm the new fluttering in her chest. They sit apart on the couch at first, each occupying their own corner, like two careful coasts. Scene by scene, their distance shrinks. Shoulders brush, then sit closer, legs slowly angle inward. Hands find each other in the dark. Halfway through the film, her eyelids grow heavy. She tilts her head, and it naturally rests on his shoulder. Without fanfare, Ji-hoon reaches for a blanket and drapes it over them both, adjusting her so she's comfortable. He watches the screen for a moment and then looks down at her sleeping face, calmer than he's ever allowed himself to be. He lets himself relax, and sleep takes him too. The rain keeps time outside. Morning light slips across the couch. Amara wakes first, careful and quiet. She watches him sleep for a long silent beat. His expression is free of the office's sharpness. A strand of hair falls across his forehead. She brushes it back with a fingertip. She whispers, barely audible, "You're dangerous." Soft smile. Then she leans down and presses a gentle kiss to his forehead. She slips into the kitchen and makes breakfast, small, deliberate movements, the sound of the pan the only company. Ji-hoon wakes to the smell of food. He stands in the doorway, momentarily unguarded, and smiles. A smile that belongs to this quiet morning, not the boardroom. They eat together, easy now. When it's time to leave, Ji-hoon steps close. He brushes a fingertip across her cheek, then presses a quick, warm kiss to her temple. "Take good care of yourself for me," he murmurs. She looks up, shy and certain. "You too," she answers. He walks away slowly, and she watches him go. On the way to the office, Ji-hoon replayed the moment in his mind, unaware of the small smile tugging at his lips. When he arrived, Eun-ji was already waiting at his desk with a neat stack of reports. "Good morning, Director. You seem in a good mood today," she said, raising an eyebrow. Ji-hoon glanced at her but didn't answer, simply sipping his coffee. The day moved on in its steady rhythm, but when Ji-hoon passed the design department, his steps slowed. Through the glass partition, he saw Amara deep in discussion with her team, her hands moving gracefully as she explained a layout. A faint smile tugged at his lips before he caught himself and continued walking. By late afternoon, Ji-hoon was signing documents when his phone vibrated on the desk. He picked it up, and his tone shifted instantly. "Mother, is something wrong?" Her voice was calm yet firm. "Come home for dinner tonight, Ji-hoon. We need to talk." He hesitated, glancing at his packed schedule, but eventually agreed. The family estate was warm and elegant as ever, the smell of traditional dishes filling the air. His mother's gentle chatter carried through dinner until she set her chopsticks down and fixed her gaze on him. "You're not getting any younger. When will you bring someone home?" Ji-hoon coughed lightly, taken off guard. "I'm focused on work right now," he answered, trying to keep his voice neutral. His father exchanged a glance with his mother but said nothing. After dinner, as he stepped out into the cool night in his house, Ji-hoon poured himself a glass of water, the conversation replaying in his head. His phone buzzed, a message from Amara, "Don't forget to eat. You look tired today." He smiled faintly, his tense shoulders relaxing. The next morning, Ji-hoon sat on his couch, laptop open, but his gaze had drifted far beyond the words on the screen. The quarterly report lay forgotten as his mother's voice from the night before replayed in his head. He exhaled slowly, sinking deeper into the cushions, deciding he didn't feel like going to the office today. After a few moments of silent debate, he reached for his phone and dialed Amara. "Come to my place," he said, voice calm but carrying that subtle warmth that was reserved only for her. "There's something I want us to go through together." When she arrived a couple of hours later, she slipped into the living room with the quiet ease of someone who no longer needed to knock twice. Her bag landed on the armchair, and she joined him on the couch, opening the file he had sent earlier. They worked side by side, their knees occasionally touching, not enough to distract them, but enough to make the air between them feel alive. They spoke in low tones, trading ideas and comments, the occasional shared smile lingering a second too long. After nearly an hour, Amara leaned back, stretching her arms before standing. "I'll make us some tea," she said, already heading toward the kitchen without waiting for permission, as if it were her own home. Ji-hoon glanced up from the laptop, his eyes softening. "Make mine stronger this time." "You always say that," she called back, her voice carrying a smile. The sound of water boiling and porcelain clinking drifted into the living room. Ji-hoon found himself listening more to her soft humming than focusing on his work. The front door opened. "Ji-hoon, his mother's voice rang out as she stepped inside. He straightened slightly. "Mother? You didn't call." She closed the door and walked in, her tone deceptively calm. Next week, you will have dinner with the daughter of our business partner. She's just returned from abroad. I already told you I'm not interested, he replied flatly, flipping a file open without looking at her. Before she could respond, Amara stepped out of the kitchen carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea, completely unaware of the tension in the room. She smiled faintly as she approached, but Jihoon's mother's gaze followed her every movement before narrowing. She's the one? Impossible. Jihoon's jaw tightened. Marriage isn't a business deal, mother. I'll choose who I want to marry. From the hallway, his father's voice called his name, but Jihoon's focus stayed on his mother. The weight of Amara's wide-eyed confusion pressed heavy on his chest. For a long moment, silence hung between the 3 of them. The only sound was the faint hiss of the kettle cooling in the kitchen. Amara's eyes flicked between Jihoon and his mother, sensing the invisible walls closing in. She placed the mugs carefully on the coffee table, her movements measured. I'll leave you 2 to talk, she said quietly. But Jihoon caught her wrist before she could take a step back. Stay. His voice was firm, but his gaze held something softer, as if her presence was the only thing keeping him steady. His mother's lips tightened. Jihoon, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time, he cut in, his tone sharper now. You keep deciding for me without asking what I want. I'm not going to live my life like a merger contract. The room felt colder, the tension threading through every breath. Amara shifted uneasily, wishing she could disappear, yet something in her chest refused to let her walk away. His father finally appeared at the doorway, his voice heavy with authority. Enough. This discussion can wait. Jihoon didn't move his gaze from his mother. No, it can't. His mother straightened, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve, and walked toward the door. We'll talk later, Jihoon, without distractions. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Amara before she left. The sound of the door closing left a hollow quiet in the air. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Amara sat down slowly, her hands wrapped around her mug though she didn't drink. I didn't mean to cause trouble, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jihoon leaned back, running a hand over his face before looking at her. You didn't. They were going to push this no matter what. She gave a small nod, though her eyes were distant. He reached over, covering her hand with his. I told you before, Amara, I don't care what they think. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but the weight in her gaze didn't lift. I know. But it's not easy, Jihoon. I'm not asking for easy, he replied quietly. I'm asking for real. The words settled between them like a promise, unshaken even by the storm that had just passed. Outside the gate, Mr. Han said. You didn't hide your disapproval very well, his tone calm but edged. Mrs. Han's gaze remained fixed on the window. I don't need to hide it. She's not the kind of woman I imagined for Jihoon. I've seen girls like her before, they never last in our world. Mr. Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Our world? Or the world you've decided for him? She finally turned to face him. This isn't just about feelings. It's about stability. About the company's future. The daughter of our business partner is the right choice. She comes from a good family, understands the responsibilities. She would make his life easier. His voice lowered, firmer now. And yet, I saw something tonight you seem determined to ignore. Jihoon looked alive with her. Happier than I've seen him in years. That happiness won't last, she said flatly. Not when reality sets in. Love doesn't solve everything. Mr. Han leaned back in his seat, the streetlights casting fleeting shadows over his face. Maybe. But forcing him into a life he doesn't want will solve nothing. Neither spoke again for the rest of the ride, their unspoken battle hanging in the air. A silent war over the future of their only son. Jihoon leaned back on the couch, his expression still tense from the earlier confrontation with his mother. But when his gaze shifted to Amara, quietly sipping her tea beside him, his mood softened. Go get dressed, he said suddenly. She blinked. Why? We're going out, he replied, already closing his laptop. Shopping. Minutes later, they were walking through a boutique bathed in warm lighting. Amara wandered between racks of clothes, fingertips brushing soft fabrics. Jihoon followed behind, hands in his pockets, his gaze quietly attentive. She paused at a display, picking up a wool hat and placing it on her head with a playful smile. How do I look? Jihoon stepped closer, his eyes sweeping over her before he nodded once. Perfect. I'm buying it for you. Amara laughed softly. You can't just buy everything I try on. Watch me, he replied, already taking the hat to the cashier. From there, they played claw machines, Jihoon far too competitive for a simple game, making Amara laugh until her cheeks ached. When they moved to the basketball hoop game, he insisted on a rematch every time she scored higher than him. At one point, Amara snapped a selfie of them making ridiculous faces. Ji-hoon leaned in without hesitation. As the day wound down, they found themselves on a rooftop terrace, the city bathed in warm, golden light. Amara leaned against the railing, her voice soft. Days like this make the world feel lighter. Ji-hoon looked at her for a long moment, then gently adjusted the hat still perched on her head. Then we'll make sure there are more days like this. That evening, the Han family estate was wrapped in a calm stillness, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the garden. In the private sitting room, Mrs. Han stood by the window, her arms crossed loosely as she gazed out into the fading light. Her husband sat in the armchair nearby, a cup of tea in hand, watching her with a knowing expression. "You're worried again," he said, breaking the silence. She turned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Shouldn't I be? He's turning down every introduction we arrange. Do you know what that means for the company's alliances?" Mr. Han set his tea down with deliberate care. "I know exactly what it means. But I also know our son. Forcing him will only make him push back harder." Mrs. Han's lips tightened. "This isn't about pushing him. It's about securing his future. I don't understand why he can't see that." Her husband leaned back, his gaze steady. "Do you remember when I asked to marry you, what your father said?" Her posture stiffened, but she didn't speak. "He told me no," he continued. "Not once, several times. Because I was just a young man running a growing business, and you were his daughter with every door already open for you. He said we were too different, that I couldn't give you the life you deserved." She exhaled slowly, memories flashing behind her eyes, the arguments, the stubborn determination in his voice, and the quiet moment when she'd told her father she wouldn't marry anyone else. "And yet," Mr. Han said softly, "you chose me. Not because it was easy, but because it was yours to choose." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle between them. Why shouldn't Ji-hoon have that same right? Mrs. Han turned back toward the window, her fingers tightening on the curtain. "You think this girl, whoever she is, will be good for him?" "I think," he said, his voice calm but certain, "that he's already decided she is. And if we keep standing in the way, we'll lose him, not just from the company, but from us." The silence that followed wasn't cold, but heavy, the kind that comes when two people love the same person but see different paths for them. Mrs. Han lingered in the sitting room for a moment after her husband left, the quiet hum of the house pressing in on her. Finally, she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, the soft click of her heels echoing against the polished floor. Inside, she sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands resting in her lap. Her husband's words replayed in her mind like an old melody she couldn't quite shake. Why shouldn't Ji-hoon have that same right? She thought back to her own stubbornness all those years ago. The tearful nights, the whispered phone calls, the way she had clung to love even when logic told her to let go. Her fingers hovered over her phone for a long moment before she finally picked it up and pressed Ji-hoon's number. He answered after just 2 rings. "Mother." "Ji-hoon, ah." Her voice was softer than usual, carrying a hesitation he rarely heard from her. "Can you come by the house tomorrow evening? I'd like to talk. Just you and me." There was a pause, as though he were weighing her tone. "All right. Good," she said quickly, almost as if afraid she might change her mind. "Come after work. I'll have dinner ready." When the call ended, she sat in silence, staring at the neatly folded blanket at the foot of the bed. Somewhere deep down, she knew tomorrow's conversation might change everything. Not just for her son, but for her. The next morning, Amara stepped into the office, the soft beige coat draped perfectly over her shoulders. The same one Ji-hoon had insisted on buying yesterday. The scarf matched, wrapping around her neck in gentle folds, the faint scent of the boutique still clinging to the fabric. As she walked through the design department, heads turned. "Wow, Amara, that looks expensive," one colleague whispered, half impressed, half curious. She only smiled, brushing it off. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Ji-hoon was already seated, scanning a document. When he looked up and saw her, his gaze lingered for a moment, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "You're late," he said, voice cool but softened by the warmth in his eyes. "You're welcome for making your purchase look this good," she replied, placing her bag down and taking a seat. A quiet chuckle escaped him before he slid a file across the table. "We have a meeting with our overseas partners in 20 minutes. Get ready." 20 minutes later, they entered the executive meeting room. The air was sharp with the scent of polished wood and fresh coffee. On the screen, a video call was already connected, a team of foreign investors waiting. Amara greeted them fluently in their language, her voice clear and confident. Ji-hoon sat beside her, watching as she listened attentively to their proposals, then translated every detail with precision. She didn't just relay words, she conveyed tone, nuance, and intent. At one point, an investor made a light joke. Amara smiled, translating it effortlessly, and the Korean executives chuckled. Ji-hoon's gaze lingered on her, a faint, almost imperceptible pride flickering in his expression. When the meeting ended, the investors complimented the smooth communication. "Your interpreter is exceptional," one said through the call. "She's not just my interpreter," Ji-hoon replied in Korean, glancing at Amara. "She's part of the reason this company runs as well as it does." Amara shot him a sideways look, half surprised, half flustered, but didn't say anything. After the meeting, Ji-hoon left for dinner at his family's house, which his mother had told him about. They began the meal in polite silence, the clink of chopsticks and the rustle of silk the only sounds. It was his mother who finally broke the quiet. "I've been wondering," she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "about the woman I saw at your house the other day. Who is she?" Ji-hoon didn't flinch. "Her name is Amara." "Amara," his mother repeated slowly, testing the syllables on her tongue. "And what exactly is her role at the company?" "I assume she's not just a guest." "She's the company's interpreter," Ji-hoon said. "But she's more than that. She coordinates with overseas partners, ensures negotiations don't collapse due to cultural misunderstandings, and handles high-level interactions." He reached into his briefcase and slid a slim presentation folder across the table toward his father. "Look here. Every major contract we've closed in the past year has her involvement. The feedback from our partners is the highest we've ever received." His father's eyes scanned the graphs, brow lifting slightly. "These numbers are impressive." His mother, curious now, leaned in to glance at the papers. Her eyes widened a little as she traced the steady upward climb in revenue and partnerships. "So, the sudden interest from international investors, the new deals we've been hearing about, this is because of her?" Ji-hoon nodded once. "She's been a driving force." For a moment, his mother didn't speak. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, not just at Amara's competence, but at the idea that someone so unassuming could have such influence. She slowly set her teacup down. "Then I want to meet her." Ji-hoon looked up, slightly taken aback by her tone. "Not just in passing," she continued. "Bring her to the house." His father gave a small nod of agreement. "It's settled then." The next day, Ji-hoon took her to his mother's house. As the gates opened and the sleek car rolled into the driveway, he glanced at her before parking. "You don't have to be nervous," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm not nervous," she replied with a small smile, though her tightened grip on her handbag said otherwise. They stepped out together, the crisp air carrying the faint scent of camellias from the garden. His mother was already seated in the tea room, posture impeccable. She looked up as they entered, her gaze lingering on Amara with quiet curiosity. "Mother," Ji-hoon greeted, bowing lightly. "This is Amara." Amara returned the bow, offering a polite smile. "Please sit," his mother said, gesturing to the seat opposite her. Ji-hoon sat beside Amara, close enough for her to feel the reassurance of his presence. "I hear you've been working with my son for some time," the mother began, pouring tea with elegant precision. "May I ask, where are you from?" Amara told her everything, including the date she started working for the company. The mother's brows lifted slightly, impressed despite herself. "And in that time, you've contributed a great deal to the company, I'm told." "I see. I must apologize for my manners the other day. I judged without knowing you." Amara's smile was warm but measured. "It's all right, ma'am. First impressions can be misleading." After a moment's pause, the mother tilted her head slightly. "If your schedule allows, I'd like you to come here sometime. Alone. No business talk, just so we can spend time together." Ji-hoon's eyes flickered with mild surprise. Amara, equally caught off guard, nodded politely. "I'd like that." Few days passed, Amara visited Ji-hoon's mother, Mrs. Han. When the front door opened, Mrs. Han greeted her with a warmth that felt almost as if they had known each other for years. "You're here," Mrs. Han said, her smile gentle but genuine, taking Amara's hand for a brief moment before leading her inside. They didn't linger in the living room. Instead, Mrs. Han guided her straight to the back garden. Amara slipped on the spare gardening gloves Mrs. Han offered, and together they moved between flower beds, watering the plants in easy silence. "You must like flowers," Amara said, watching the way Mrs. Han inspected each stem with care. "They've been my quiet company for many years," Mrs. Han replied. They don't rush, they just grow. After tending the garden, Mrs. Han invited Amara to sit in the living room. She returned with a large photo album and set it gently on the coffee table. This, she said, opening the first page, is Ji-hoon when he was 5. Amara leaned closer. A little boy with a bowl haircut stared back at them, holding an ice cream cone that looked bigger than his face. She laughed softly. He hasn't changed much, she teased. Mrs. Han's eyes softened. He spent his university years in Seoul, always buried in books, even during holidays. Sometimes I worried he would forget to enjoy life. They went through page after page, Ji-hoon in his school uniform, at debate competitions, at a graduation ceremony with an awkwardly proud smile. Mrs. Han shared small stories in between, her voice growing more relaxed with every memory. Weeks pass, Mrs. Han calling Amara unexpectedly. I'm going shopping, would you like to come? The two trying on scarves in a boutique, laughing when they accidentally choose the same one. Strolling through the park on a Sunday afternoon, stopping to watch children play. Sitting side by side in the garden again, sipping tea while the sun dipped low. It became routine. Some days Mrs. Han would call Amara just to keep her company, other times to invite her for a short outing. The formality between them faded. What replaced it was a gentle, almost mother-daughter closeness. One evening, Ji-hoon arrived at his parents' house earlier than expected. Stepping through the door, he heard laughter drifting from the kitchen. He paused, peeking in. Amara stood beside his mother, arranging side dishes on the table, while Mrs. Han recounted a story that made them both laugh. Ji-hoon's lips curved into a quiet smile. He didn't interrupt right away. Instead, he stood there for a moment, watching the two most important women in his life chatting as if they'd always belonged in the same room. After that night, Ji-hoon sat on the couch, staring at his phone. The laughter of earlier echoed in his mind, Amara's laughter mingling so easily with his mother's. He realized it then. It wasn't just affection. It wasn't just comfort. It was love. And he couldn't imagine his future without her. The city lights stretched endlessly, twinkling like fallen stars. Ji-hoon had reserved the entire rooftop, soft music playing, candles flickering along the edges, the night breeze gentle. Amara stepped out of the elevator, eyes widening at the sight. Ji-hoon, what is all this? He walked toward her slowly, his expression steady, but his heartbeat unsteady. For a long time, I thought my life only needed discipline, hard work, and results, he began, his voice low but firm. But then you came in, and changed everything. Amara's breath caught, her eyes already glistening. Ji-hoon took her hands, holding them tightly as if anchoring himself. You gave me more than support. You gave me warmth. You gave me home. And now, I don't want to imagine tomorrow without you in it. Slowly, he went down on one knee. A small velvet box appeared in his hand, opening to reveal a ring that shimmered under the city lights. Amara, his voice trembled ever so slightly. Will you marry me? The night fell silent, except for the faint hum of the city below and the rapid beat of Amara's heart. Her lips parted, tears welling as she looked down at the man who had always been so composed, now vulnerably waiting for her answer. She blinked quickly, a small laugh escaping through the emotion. You, her voice broke softly. You really planned all this? Ji-hoon's lips curved faintly, though his voice carried weight. I planned it because you are the only plan that matters now. Amara's chest tightened. The words, the gaze, the vulnerability. It was everything she never imagined would come from the man who once kept walls so high around his heart. Her tears slipped free as she nodded, whispering, Yes. Ji-hoon's breath hitched, as if he'd been holding it the whole time. Slowly, carefully, he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had always been waiting for this moment. The crowd of stars above bore witness as Ji-hoon rose, pulling her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest, her tears dampening his shirt, but her smile unshakable. He tightened his embrace, whispering near her ear. From now on it's you. Only you. Amara leaned back just enough to meet his eyes. And you're mine, she said softly, her smile trembling but sure. Their lips met, not rushed, not hesitant but steady. Certain. A kiss that carried every unspoken promise of a shared tomorrow. The music swelled in the background, the city lights flickering like fireworks below. And for that moment, time stood still. Weeks had passed since Ji-hoon's proposal, and now the day had arrived. The venue was dressed in soft white and pastel hues, flowers cascading from the arch, silk ribbons dancing in the breeze. Guests filled the seats, the sound of strings filling the air. At the front, Ji-hoon stood tall in a sleek black suit. His hands were clasped together, betraying the slightest tremor of anticipation. His father, dignified and proud, stood nearby. Mrs. Han, graceful as ever, adjusted her son's boutonniere before stepping aside, her eyes shimmering. The music swelled. Every guest turned. Amara appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in her gown. Her beauty wasn't just in the dress. It was in the confidence she carried, the joy that radiated from her eyes. Halfway down the aisle, a hush spread through the crowd. A woman, elegant, poised, entered quietly at the back. Amara froze for a heartbeat when she saw her. It was her mother. For a moment, Amara's eyes filled. Her mother gave her a soft nod, mouthing, "I wouldn't miss this for the world." With trembling hands, Amara's uncle passed her gently to her mother, and together they finished the walk to Ji-hoon. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Ji-hoon pulled her close, kissing her as the crowd erupted in applause. Flower petals rained down, and Amara's mother wiped her tears, while Mrs. Han beamed, clasping her husband's hand tightly. The company workers raised their glasses in unison. To Director Ji and Amara's Sai. Everyone laughed when one employee shouted, "Don't forget, she's the real boss now." 3 years later, Amara sat on a picnic blanket with Mrs. Han, slicing fruit while their 2 little ones, a boy and a girl, chased each other through the grass. Their giggles rang like music, their tiny footsteps scattering across the lawn. Inside the glass doors, Ji-hoon watched quietly for a moment before stepping outside. He carried a tray with fresh tea, his expression calm, almost reverent, as though he couldn't quite believe this was his life. He set it down and eased into the grass beside Amara. The children came running, tumbling into their parents' arms. Amara pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair, while Ji-hoon lifted their son into the air, both laughing freely, without restraint. Mrs. Han looked at them, her eyes soft, a peace she had long prayed for finally blooming before her. In the end, love is not just about the perfect beginning, but about choosing each other, again and again, through every season of life. It is patience when things are difficult, laughter when days feel heavy, and courage to stand together when the world tries to pull you apart. Ji-hoon and Amara remind us that true love doesn't ask where you come from, but where you're willing to go together.